Hi, and welcome to the start of our May and June webinar series. This is Barb Tyson, and today we have Adam Loory with us to talk about new thoughts on man overboard recovery, a very important topic for all of us. A couple of quick reminders. Please keep your video off and keep muted. Use the chat box that I've opened to ask any questions, or if you have any comments you want to add. We are recording this webinar, and everyone who registered will be emailed the link. And now I'm going to hand things over to Alex Helfand, our Salty Dog Education Coordinator.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Barb, and welcome everybody. We've got a really great number of participants today. This is a topic that I think is really important. For me, it's one I've never had to, it's a skill I've never had to exercise, although part one of the discussion today is on staying on the boat, and that's something that hopefully we'll all manage to do. I'm very happy to be able to introduce Adam Loory, who I've known for a very long time. We've sailed together on Long Island Sound in everything from lasers to, big boats and 30 plus knots. I've learned a tremendous amount from Adam. He's a member of the Storm Trysail. He was a past chairman of the Storm Trysail. He's also been he's an instructor in the safety at sea, and he's a general manager of UK International. And with no more than that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam and let him take us through some new thoughts and new approaches to man overboard recovery. Adam, it's all yours.
I am having problems getting rid of this dialog box. Does everyone see it? The one that's saying the meeting's being recorded?
You should say got it.
Yeah, well, my cursor disappears when I'm in play mode. Okay, there we go. Got it. Well, welcome everybody to the seminar. This is a subject near and dear to my heart, especially since I've been on a boat where somebody's gone in the water. And as a result, I've been teaching, and that happened years after I started teaching man overboard recovery. I originally got into it because I've been sailing a lot with Rich DeMoulin, who is one of the most accomplished ocean racers in the world. And he's been in a past Commodore of the Storm Trysail Club. He's won the double-handed division of the Bermuda race 4 times with his Express 37 Laura, and he and I and many others at Storm Trysail have given a lot of thought to what happens when somebody goes in the water and how you get them back on the boat. And as a result, for a long time, we talked the quick stop. And as we've
Adam,
yep.
I think you have to share your desktop again. I think we may have lost it.
Oh, no. Okay. So let's see. Let me go to Zoom and share screen. And share screen. And now play. Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank
good. All right. So one of the things I'm going to start out with is let's try not to be the man overboard, and then we can just skip to the end. But no, that we won't do that. But there are a lot of things you want to do to try not to be the person in the water, because once you are in the water and separated from the boat, there's a good chance that bad things will happen. And so you don't want to really have that happen. So let's go over a few ways to make sure you can stay on the boat. And okay. All right. Why won't it go to the next slide? What is going on with Zoom today? Well, now something's just happened. Okay, so one of the ways that you're going to stay on the boat is having jack lines rigged, and jack lines should go from almost at the front of the boat to almost all the way to the back of the boat. And also you should have more than just 2 jack lines, which we'll show you. But when you leave the cockpit, the ones on the side decks, or if you should run them so that you can go uninterrupted without having to hook and unhook. So they If your shrouds go all the way out to the hull deck joint, then the jack line should run inside of them. If your shrouds come down into the middle of the deck, you can run them outside of the shrouds and in between the lifelines. But also, if you put a little twist in them, that makes it easier to hook onto them. Don't use wire that can roll under your feet. Webbing is a really good thing to use for jack lines, specifically Spectra webbing. Okay, we're going to go through this again. Huh? I think when somebody tries to join the meeting, and if they aren't let in, I can't change. This is going to be a long day.
Do you want to go to non-share mode? Not, where you're. Whoops. Did we lose you?
Yes, I believe that he has fallen out of the meeting altogether. I'm sure he will be right back in. So we may have a little pause here. And I don't think it's people joining the meeting that would slow that down.
Yeah, I think it might have been the focus on his mouse. Maybe too many things on the desktop. As I say, please stand by. We have some technical difficulties.
I'll shoot him a quick note here.
Let me get my phone and I'll give him a call.
Okay. Wonder if he has low bandwidth, although it looked like he was doing it from home. But that can really delay the forwarding of his slides and might be why he dropped out. Okay, here he's back with us, so he's hopping in the room right now. I'm gonna make him a co-host. Okay, Adam, you're back again.
All right, where did I lose everybody?
Do you have pretty good bandwidth today?
Yeah, and I'm plugged into the wall. I'm not using Wi-Fi.
Okay, I thought maybe that's what was the delay in the slideshow. There, you're back up again.
Okay. Was I talking about the
That's
secondary?
where, yeah, you were just switching to the slide, I think.
Okay, great. So this is another set of jack lines that Rich DeMullen has rigged, and he feels that it's a lot better to not use the handrails that most of the boats have, and just a hook to the jack line that he's rigged up here. It's just a piece of Spectra. That Spectra line, you don't have to worry about it being round because you're not going to stand on it and have it slip under your feet. And since it's Spectra, the lifeline tether hook will slide along it really well. One of the points I wanted to make is whenever you leave the cockpit, you always want to be attached to the windward jack line. And when you're in the cockpit, for that matter, you want to be attached to the windward jack line so that if you do fall and slip, you fall on the boat. You don't fall out of the boat. And one of the classic stories was I sailed in the Sydney Hobart race in 2017. And we ground the spinnaker sheet on one of the cabin top winches. And the sheet was on the leeward cabin top winch. So the guy grinding the winch clipped onto the jack line that was nearest to him. It was at his feet on the leeward rail there. And I said, Rick, you don't want to clip there. And he says, why? He says, well, if the boat rolls out, you're going to be in the water. And he says, good point. And so he clipped to, there was a pad eye in the center of the cockpit that he clipped to. And next watch, we wiped out. And his feet were in the water, but he was still on the boat. But he saw the light and he thanked me very much for the suggestion. So always hook to the windward side. The other thing is that if you're sitting on the rail or if you're sitting in place and you're not going to be moving around a lot and you only have a 6-foot tether, you don't want to fall 6 feet, because if a 200-pound weight falls 6 feet, the jerk load when you reach the end of the tether is 2,000 pounds. And so that's enough to break ribs. So what you want to do is reduce how much you can fall by taking your tether hook, go around the jack line, and then clip it back to yourself. Now your 6-foot tether has become a 3-foot tether, and you can only fall 3 feet. When I'm driving the boat and I'm not going to be moving around, that's what I do with my tether. If I'm sitting on the rail hiking, that's what I do with my tether. And that way I don't have to carry around 2 tethers. They make a lot of noise. They're a lot of extra weight, a lot more stuff to manage. So this way you can make your 1 tether do 2 jobs. Okay, so. Also, it's really important that you're able to hook your tether to a hard point in the cockpit before you come out of the companionway, and you don't want to unclip until your feet are back down inside the cabin, because the primary way that people fall off the boat is coming up or going down or taking a leak. And because when you're coming up, you're not aware of the waves, you can't see them, you don't know what's coming. When you're going down, you're at the end of your watch, you're thinking about that cup of coffee, you're thinking about getting that weather forecast, or you're thinking about going to sleep, you stop paying attention. So it's really important that you stay hooked. The racing rules require that there's a pad eye that you can hook onto before you leave the companionway. And the picture on the right shows a hard spot there. Rich has put a piece of spectral webbing on it to make it bigger so that more tethers can be hooked to that one spot. Also, Rich double hands a lot. So what he does is he leaves his tether just hanging there, waiting for, that way it's waiting for the next person or waiting for him when he wants to go back up on deck. And it's already hooked on, it's ready. Now we have a video to show. And in this video, this is not an enactment. This has really happened. This was in the Clipper Around the World race in the South Atlantic. So let me show this to you.
The moment an ocean race became a matter of life or death. Watch as sailor Arthur Bowers comes off watch and does his safety line to go below deck. The crew has practiced this till it's been drilled into them, but this is no test. A life ring is thrown, it doesn't reach him. They try again, with a crew member in the seat in a harness, and Arthur is grabbed.
So it's just unbelievable that somebody caught a video of exactly what we've been talking about for a long time. And so that just shows the importance of, why is everybody calling me today? Of keeping clipped on until you get down below, or passing your tether up and having somebody clip it on for you before you come out of the companionway. It just it can happen, and it does happen. Also, since people tend to fall overboard when relieving themselves in the back of the boat, one of the good things to do in any type of questionable seaway is to take a leak down below and use a P cup. And that way you can stand up, you can be relaxed, you can brace yourself. This way you can put it in the cup and you don't have to worry about running the electric motor on the head and waking everybody up. It's got a cap on it, you can carry it up, you can dump it over the side once you get on deck, or you can pass it up to somebody, but it's much safer than going to the back of the boat. All ways you can stay on the boat. So now we can get into the new thinking about what you can do to recover somebody if they haven't followed one of these rules, or something's gone wrong and somebody's clip broke, or they thought they clipped it all the way and it didn't clip, and God forbid somebody's gone overboard. And we'll show you a couple of different ways, and then we'll talk specifically about what to do if you're just a cruising couple instead of, you know, a full crewed boat, or just a boat with, you know, 4 people. So most of the times that somebody goes overboard, they're not going overboard in flat seas, and they're not going overboard in 10 knots of breeze. They're going overboard in heavy air. They're going overboard when there are bigger waves. And standard man overboard teachings is that you sail around to the person and you stop the boat next to the person, and then you pull them back on the boat. And trying to do that in calm conditions is hard enough. Just imagine how many times you tried to sail up to a mooring and you gave up sailing to a mooring because you ended up motoring to the mooring, because sailing to the mooring, you just didn't do it properly. Either you were going too fast or you were going too slow. Well, imagine trying to sail up to a mooring in 25, 30, 40 knots of breeze and 6-foot waves. You're not going to try it. It's not going to happen. So why teach the quick stop? So we're going to take some of the best parts of the quick stop with some new thoughts on how to do it. But the lessons learned from a few sailors who have been lost in the last 6 years is that A, you need to get the person on the first try, because the longer in the water, the worse things that can happen to them. And B, you need to make contact with the person before they're next to the boat, because the more time that they are next to the boat, they can get hit by the boat. They can get hit by if the boat has chines, which a lot of the modern boats do have chines. The chines can hit them on the top of the head. Or if you try to sail up to them, you can also, worse that happen is run them over. And that happened in the Chicago Mac race when the TP-52 Ameti went over the person in the water. They don't know if they knocked him out when he went over, but he did go under the boat. And on the 3rd try, when they went to get him, just as they were going to reach over to get him, the person slipped beneath the waves, and it was a week later before his body was found. So we're going to teach you some different things that you can do it on the first try. So since you need to do it on the first try to increase the odds of having a successful recovery, I'm going to tell you the most important thing to use to get back to the person is the boat's engine. But before that happens, you have to make sure that there are no lines in the water, because if you wrap the propeller, you're going to lose your best tool for recovering a person in the water. So here's what I want to teach you. And that is coming up with a plan for how you're going to do this. And here are all the steps, but I can't emphasize enough, and I will go back and talk about it a lot more in the end, that you need to practice all of this on your own boat, because every boat handles differently. You need to practice it just like when you learn anything, you practice it on paper, you practice it in a low stress situation, and then you practice it in a high stress situation. So we're going to We're going to think about it right now. We're going to write down some things. Then I want you to go out and practice in 5 knots of wind and then 15 knots of wind, and then try it in 20 knots of wind, and then try it in the dark. But you need to practice this, and you need to practice it more than once a year, because as I say to people who go racing, the first thing your race crew does when they get out to their course is they go out and they do a few tacks and jibes to warm the crew up and get everybody's heads in the game. Well, if something as common as tacking and jibing needs to be practiced every time you go racing, just imagine how many times you need to practice a man overboard recovery to get it right. So let's go through the steps. First thing that happens is somebody has to yell man overboard and get flotation in the water and assign a pointer. Flotation in the water helps, if the person doesn't have a life jacket, it helps. If you have a flotation in the water, there's more stuff they can grab to. It makes the person easier to be seen. When a person goes in the water, all you see is their head. And if they're wearing a life jacket, then you'll see the top of the life jacket, which is a big help. But if you can get some cushions and stuff floating in the water and create a debris field, it'll be a lot easier, because not everything will bounce up on the top of the wave at the same time. And if there's a bunch of stuff floating around out there, you got a better chance of finding the person. The person who's the spotter needs to point constantly at the person in the water, because if they get hit in the face by a wave and they have to blink, there you can follow their arm is pointing to where the person was. If the person goes behind a wave, their arm pointing will let you know where the person is. The pointer needs to stand up, and the pointer needs to be talking to the helmsman at all times. The other really important thing is to hit the man overboard button on your GPS. All the boats that do the Bermuda race and any of the other big ocean races, the rules are that there needs to be a button in the cockpit that the helmsman can hit within 15 seconds of the person going in the water. That means it's usually on the binnacle, or it's someplace close by the helmsman. Every GPS is different. Some GPSs have a dedicated man overboard button. Others, like mine, have 2 keys that you hit at the same time. Everybody needs to know how to do it. Everybody. Because you don't know who's going in the water. And when we talk about using the engine, everybody needs to know how to start the engine, so that you if the person who knows all this goes in, you need to have backup people doing it. So I jumped ahead a step. As soon as you've yelled man overboard and you've got any other crew members up from down below to help, and you've hit the man overboard button on the GPS so that you can navigate back to where the person was, you need to stop the boat and stay near them. The quick stop taught you to go sail around in a big looping circle. That allowed you to get too far away. So what you need to do to stop the boat, we all know how to stop the boat, head into the wind. That stops the boat. So just head into the wind and get control and think about what's going on. Get people up from down below, get stuff in the water. If you throw it downwind to the person, they'll get it. That way, the person in the water knows that you know he's in the water, and the person in the water won't panic. Panic is a big thing that in the person in the water is a problem. So you need to avoid that. By heading into the wind, you stop the boat, you stay near the person. Now you can get sails down. Get the jib down. If it has hanks, drop it. If it is on a roller furler, roll it up. But get the sail out of the way. Now get the lines out of the water. The engine can be started in a neutral, but make sure all the sheets are out of the water. Some people are going to come around and motor around with the mainsail up. And because it's harder to get the main down. But if you have enough people, get your mainsail down. And so you can do this from the head to wind position, as long as you know the engine is started and you can use it. But by having all the sails down, you can pick up the person in the water from any angle to the wind. If the main is up, you've got to be, to stopping the boat, you've got to be heading up into the breeze, and the boom's going to be flopping around. So make sure, if you can, get the mainsail down. So, but don't put that engine in gear until you know all the lines are out of the water. Now you can motor around and get back to the person who's in the water. Here's just a video to show the flexibility that the engine gives you. This is during the Storm Trysail Safety at Sea training day. And we went out with 7 crews with a coach on each boat and to show people what they do to pick up somebody in the water. We had these floatable contraptions that filled up with water. So they weighed 200 pounds full of water. So to give people a good experience of, you're not just picking up a fender. It gives you more of a realistic thing. But this is part that I'm going to show you, talks about how the engine can help you a lot.
Okay, get ready to hit reverse. And then luff up, broadside, and luff up now, next to it, right next to it. Come up, come up.
And there's no way they could reach that person because the person didn't turn at the right time. And so he said, "Do you want me to go around again?" And I said, "No."
Back down some more.
So I had him hit reverse.
Get on neutral. And now forward to go up.
And this way, you didn't have to make a whole new circle. You stayed right near the MOB.
Leg up to him. Bring the left leg around. Left leg.
And I think more of us know how to maneuver our boats under power than under sail at
He's
times.
at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Hold this straight.
And there shows how a bad approach was rescued by the engine. Sails were down, made it a lot easier to come into position. I think actually on this one we had the main up. So, but it's light wind, so you could motor against the engine, the sail pretty well. Now, the other thing we learned is that the person in the water being next to the boat is dangerous. The chines can come, they can hit him, the boat can hit him. Also, if you try to maneuver and sail right up to the person in the water, the helmsman loses sight of the MOB. If the MOB stays 10 to 15 feet away from the boat, the helmsperson can always see the MOB and maneuver and not run them over and has sight of what's going on. So one of the things that we want to teach you that's different is that you can use the life sling as a throw rope. So take the life sling, bring it up amidships, motor the boat into a position that's upwind of the person in the water. And when you're still 10 or 15 feet away, and then toss them the life sling. And here's a video. But you throw it to the person there, that way the person on the helm can see, the person in the water can put it on, and now you can hook up the halyard and pull the person up. Person will not be next to the boat until the halyard is going up. So you're minimizing the amount of time that the person in the water is next to the boat, and that way you're minimizing the time that the person is in any danger. What I show here is one of the things I teach is that the life sling should always have a bowline tied in it that is, probably 20 feet away from the life sling itself. That way you can attach the halyard to the life sling without having to lean over the lifelines, and you can attach it before the person is next to the boat. So life sling is a throw rope. This is just a review. It keeps the boat away from the person in the water. You don't have to come right alongside so that the helmsman can see. You don't have to worry about, also, the key thing is if you're not right next to the person, you don't have to worry about them getting hurt by the boat's propeller. And actually, having a person hurt by the boat's propeller is sort of something that people worry about too much, because on most mono hulls, the propeller is on center line and it's pretty deep in the water. And so the propeller's only problem is if you run the person over, and then they can get closer to the prop. But if you stay 10 to 15 feet away from the person in the water, there's no way they're going to have an issue with prop. You can use the propeller So with forward and reverse to maneuver the boat, to keep close, to get into position so that you can throw the lifeline. And you can attach the halyard to the life sling while the person is still away from the boat. Done, done, done. Here's just another photo of the traditional life sling recovery. And you can see there's the bowline, it's about 10 feet away. This could be 25 feet away. And you can just hook the halyard right on. And one person with a winch can get, one small person with a winch can get a big person out of the water. This is just an example showing that bag is full of water and it weighs 200 pounds. And there's just one person with a cabin top winch on a 33-foot boat pulling that 200 pounds out of the water. Now, there is another idea that we've come up with, which came from the really big maxi boats, 100-footers like Comanche, and the big 70-foot offshore trimarans. Those boats are basically uncontrollable at slow speeds, and they're big, and they can really hurt somebody if they get close. So they came up with a plan to be able to get somebody out of the water and while they were further away from them. And we've come up with a name for it, calling it the midline lift. And what you're doing is you're using the life sling to, you tow it around like you would tow it normally in the circle. The person gets into the sling itself, and then you, with the life sling is dead-ended on the back of the boat, and you attach the halyard anywhere between the cleat on the back of the boat and the person in the water. And so it's basically in the middle of the line. So when you start raising the halyard, you have a 1 to 2 that's pulling the person out of the water relatively quickly, but also you're able to start pulling them out of the water when they're at the end of the life sling line. Now, getting the length of the life sling line properly is important. When you buy the life sling, it comes with 150 feet of line. And the midline lift will not get the person out of the water with 150 feet of line unless your mast is more than 75 feet tall. That's a big mast. So what you need to do is a little bit of shortening of your life sling line so that you can be able, when you do attach the halyard to the middle of it, you're going to get the person not only out of the water, but up over the top of the life sling, up over the lifelines. So Rich DeMoulin's rule of thumb is to take the luff of your mainsail. So that's your P measurement. So that's from the boom to the top of the mast. And so on an Express 37, that's 42 feet. And so his life sling line, he shortened it down to 84 feet. And then that way he knows he'll be able to get the person clear out of the water. You can even make it shorter than that. The key, and when we did the safety at sea training, some of the instructors felt that they couldn't tow the life sling line, the short life sling line around to the person. Well, we showed them what they were doing wrong, and that is you need to make your circle around the person really tight. And it's just the same as if you're picking up, getting the tow rope to a water skier. If you make big looping circles, the tow rope is going to follow around the boat. And if the boat never gets close to the person, you won't get the line close to the person. So make a tight turn around to drag that line around, and even a short life sling line will get to them. The other thing we learned is that yellow polypropylene line that comes with the life sling, it's strong, but it's really stretchy. And it can stretch as much as 10 feet with somebody in the water. So what Rich did is he replaced the tow line on his life sling with uncovered Spectra. And Spectra floats. So he bought red spectra, so you could see it on the water. I don't think they make yellow spectra. And so he got, 84 feet of that and tied that on, and that's what he uses. And that way, when the halyard shackle is attached to it, it slides really well on the spectra line, because spectra is really slippery stuff. So the other thing that Rich has learned through lots of practice is that you always want to have the life sling on the same side of the boat, and therefore you want to pick the person up on that side, so that therefore you always want to drop your mainsail on the side opposite of the life sling. So on his boat, his life sling's on starboard, he drops the main to port. Make a tight turn around and come back and get him. Now we'll show you some, here's an MOB view of the midline lift. And so you can see here, up here is the halyard. This is the life sling line here. And here is the life sling bridle. So it's just pulling the person up out of the water. And as you crank up on the halyard, the line is going to, you're going to be probably using a spinnaker halyard. You'll be bringing the person up amidships. One of the key things to learn in doing the midline lift is that once you start grinding the halyard up, it's important to turn the boat perpendicular to the person in the water, so that they're coming in aimed at midships too, and that will help reduce chafe on the halyard exiting the halyard shift box at the top of the mast. So it's really important to know your boat, and it's really important to practice this. And you can break down the practice into 2 different modules. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water. The pulling somebody out of the water, when you first start practicing it, do it at the dock, do it at the mooring, do it when you're anchored, but do it when the boat's stopped. Have somebody jump in the water, swim 10 feet out, 15 feet out, get the life sling, throw it to them. Or just, and then you can practice the midline lift, or you can practice just attaching the halyard to a bowline in the life sling tow rope and pull them out of the water, and get everybody to try pulling them up, and notice how easy or hard it is. Notice and which winches work, and if you have an electric winch handle, where it is and how to use it. But try all these different things, and you'll prove to a weaker crew member that they can pull the heaviest crew member out of the water by practicing it. Then the approach to the person in the water is, you can use a cushion, but a cushion will drift pretty quickly in the wind, in the current. So tie a bucket to it. The bucket will act as a drogue, and it'll stop it from moving. It'll also make it a little more difficult to pull it out of the water, which is good practice. But only practice with somebody in the water once you have done this a lot and have a good idea of what's going on. You have a written plan, and everybody knows what's going on. And use your engine. I can't say that enough, but make sure all the lines are out of the water. But here's an example of why modern boats don't do well at slow speeds. And that is, a lot of modern boats and have twin rudders. And here's one that shows you the chines, and the propeller is in the middle, and the propeller does not produce any prop wash over the rudder at low speed, and therefore the rudders are basically stalled at low speed, and you need to get the boat going. And so if you need to be going, 2 or 3 or 4 knots, that's too fast for picking up a person in the water. And the plane here just shows that it had twin rudders, but it had engines in front of each one of those rudders. Also, a lot of the modern boats have really deep, skinny keels, and those skinny keels don't develop any tracking until they get moving. And that's why, you got to have speed on. So if you need speed to control the boat, you can't be anywhere near the person in the water. So that's all the reasons why we teach the midline lift or using the life sling as a throw rope. Once again, here's a just, Rich, start by practicing in light air and then practice in heavy air. Get everybody in the crew to know all the different things. Have different crew members try steering the boat. Have different crew members. Everybody knows how to start the engine, knows how to push the MOB button. And for the same reason, everybody should know how to use the VHF radio to call a mayday. If you have a crew member in the water, that's a mayday. And so you get on channel 16 and it's mayday, mayday, mayday 3 times, and repeat the name of the boat 3 times, and then what's going on. And that's really important to practice to do. Also, it's really good if in your practice you have somebody shoot video or take notes. And video is the best note taker because you'll be able to review those of what went right, what went wrong. You'll see somebody who panicked, or you'll see somebody who didn't push the man overboard button, or you'll see somebody who fumbled around with the life sling and whatever. You'll find out what your weak points are and what's going wrong. The MOB button, you can practice pushing that on your chart plotter. If you need to get the instruction book out for your chart plotter, get it out so that you can look. I just put in a new chart plotter on my boat this winter. And when I was moving my boat from the travel lift pit to the boatyard where my mast is, while it was on autopilot, that was the first thing I did. It was because I saw that there was no button that said MOB on the chart plotter. And so I said, all right, how am I going to do this? And it turns out you have to hit 2 keys at once. And so that was something I had to learn. Know how your boat's going to behave when it's stopped. One of the things that you're going to find when you are just a cruising couple and somebody goes overboard, that means there's one person on deck to get the sails down, hit the man overboard button, to get the life sling ready, and to get the halyard ready. So that's all the more reason you don't want to be next to the person in the water, because if that one person on deck leaves the helm to get a halyard or leaves the helm to try to aid getting the person back on, the boat's going to be sloshing around all over the place. So the last thing you want to have is the boat out of control, running the person over in the water. So for cruising couples, the life sling is your best option. And that is, so stop the boat immediately, hit the man overboard button, and stay in the neighborhood of where the person is, because now you've lost the pointer, you've lost the spotter, because when you go to lower the sails or roll up the jib or throw the life sling in the water, you won't be looking at the person in the water. So that's why it's really key to hit that button so that you can navigate back. And everybody should practice watching the navigation function so that you can navigate back to that spot, and watch how the numbers change and the arrows change on your chart plotter. But so the key is, if you're just 2 people, stop the boat, head up into the wind. Okay. And then start the engine, keep it in neutral, roll up the jib. And if you can put the autopilot on and put the boat in slow forward so that it'll hold position into the wind so you can get the main down, do that. And then throw out the life sling, make your turn around, get the life sling to the person in the water, stop the boat, and now you can do the midline lift by just attaching the halyard to the life sling line. And now you just grind the halyard up. And once the person is in the life sling and has it underneath their shoulders, they're attached to the boat. And you can, you can do whatever, and they're staying with you. They're attached. The one thing we don't talk about is if the person in the water is unconscious. And if you're a cruising couple, there is not a lot that can go well in that situation. And that's why we go back to the top of this program. And if you're just a couple, you have to work much, much, much harder to make sure nobody goes in the water, because it's scary if one person goes in the water and is unconscious, because the chance of a good recovery are pretty minimal. And that's why we really can't even talk about it much. And if you are a fully crewed team, then the way to get a person back on the boat is you're going to need to lower somebody into, you're going to have to get the boat near the person in the water, lower a crew member down in a harness with a short tether that they can attach to the life jacket or underneath the shoulders of the person, and you're going to have to bear hug them as the two of you get lifted out of the water. And if we go back to this video, that's how the Clipper Around the World race teaches to get anybody back on the boat, is they lower somebody down because the boats are really high-sided. And in this case, the guy who went in the water was conscious, but he had been in the South Atlantic for 18 minutes and he was hypothermic, and he wasn't strong enough to get the life sling over his head, and he wasn't strong enough to keep his arms down to aid in his own recovery. And that's why it was important that they lowered somebody down, hooked onto him, and then the two of them got brought up together. Let's see, what else can we get? Once you've practiced, now it's time to make your cookbook of everything you need to do on your own boat. And Rich DeMullen has his here with if the engine starts and with if the engine doesn't start. And he plans ahead. He thinks through everything that can happen. And that's what you need to do on your own boat. But you can't come up with this cookbook until you've gone down a few wrong roads. And that's why it's really important to practice. Just don't read what somebody says in a book and think you know it. You got to go out and practice it on your own boat. Try it, figure out what works for you and your crew. And that's how you've got to do it. And then you make up a plan and then you post it so that you can quiz people on it. And if you get a lot of new crew members, you show it to them and then you go out and practice it. You need to practice, practice, practice. All right. One other thing about the life sling is that it's really important that you make your approach at some point in the beginning really close to the person. The time I was on a boat where we had somebody go overboard was at the American Yacht Club Spring Series. And it was at 4.5 minutes before our start. And the life sling went over immediately as the pointer was pointing. And we went within, 10 feet of him as we made the turn to bring the life sling line to him. And I'll never forget him pleading, please get me out of here. I'm so cold. It made such a huge effect, but we got the life sling line to him. And as soon as he gets it, that's when it's time to stop the boat. And then you can either pull the life sling collar to the person, or a lot of times the boat doesn't stop immediately and it'll come to the person. If, God forbid, you're moving too quickly and you can't get to reverse fast enough and the person is being dragged in the water and you're the person, roll over on your back to keep the water from getting in your nose. That's a big thing. So one last thing and this is what Rich DeMullen found, and it's a motto from the U.S. Marine Corps, and that is train the way you fight, fight the way you train. And that is go out and practice so that you can use that practice when you need it. And I can't say if racing sailors have to practice tacking and jibing every time they go out to go racing, just think how many times you have to practice man overboard to have it be successful, because as soon as this is not going to happen in light air, and it's probably going to happen in the middle of the night, when you don't see something and you trip or you got lazy because you were tired. So that's why it's really important to practice, practice, practice. Now I'll open it up to any questions.
Okay, well, thank you, Adam. That was great. We have a couple of questions. Why don't we start right from the top? Luke asked the question, what about the risk of going over the lifeline? I'm assuming, I think this question popped up just after you were talking about harnesses
Okay.
and tethers.
And that's why you want to be pulling against the jack lines with your tether as you walk. That keeps your feet glued down to the deck. And if it's really horrid conditions, you're crawling. You're not walking, you're crawling. So your gut will tell you what you got to do based on the conditions. But pulling on your tether to pull the jack lines up will help keep your feet on the deck. And if you are on the windward side, if you fall on the boat. You don't fall into the water.
Okay.
Does that answer Luke's question?
Well, I think it might.
Okay.
If he wants some clarification, he won't hesitate to ask. I had a question about running your engine. Okay, going forward in heavy seas, no big deal. But you got to the point where you're talking about, well, let's back up, and as opposed to circle around again. Any thoughts, comments about boats' behavior in reverse in big seas?
Yeah, one of the slides I cut out is Rich DeMoulin has a very short strop that he can attach to his tiller, so that when he leaves the tiller, and if the boat starts to back up, the rudder can't get jammed over all the way. And so it keeps the rudder, within 10 degrees of center line either side, so that you don't, torque the rudder bearing or torque the shaft. And that's one thing. And yeah, when you're going in reverse, you got to hold the helm pretty hard, and especially if there are waves. But it's really key not to make that second turn if you can avoid it, because your time is of the essence of getting the person out of the water.
Okay.
And that time that when somebody went over in the spring series, he went over at 4.5 minutes, and at 2 minutes, we were back to picking our spot on the starting line.
You guys had practiced a little bit.
Well, but the thing was that Andrew's boat was one of the boats that was at the Safety at Sea seminar in March of that year. He learned that, when he tried to do the traditional quick stop, that his boat had a narrow, deep keel. And as soon as he dropped the jib and was going under 3 knots, the boat went into irons. So he knew that he didn't have control over the boat at slow speeds, and especially in high winds, because that year when we did it in the morning, it was blowing 25, 30. And there are pictures of it I could show you. But and so that was good practice where he learned about his boat. And that's why we knew we had to use the life sling immediately.
Okay. Kevin had a question. What size Spectra line is suggested for the life sling replacement?
6 to 8 millimeter. 8 millimeter is easy on the hands, but this is not a line that's going to go around a winch. It's going to be hoisted on the halyard. So 6 millimeter, the braking strength is over 2,000 pounds. So.
Okay. So you're talking a bunch about, our situation where most of us are going to be sailing very short-handed, as in just a couple. And you talked about at one point throwing the tall boy, or I guess that's a man overboard marker. You want to add any more about the importance of doing that, since you don't have a spotter, and in terms of tossing something in when somebody does go over? Yeah.
You want to, if somebody goes over, you want to create a debris field. So get, cushions, the horseshoe collar, or a round collar, whatever you got in the cockpit that you can throw in the water, you want to throw it. And if you have a man overboard module, pull the pin on the mom and get that inflated into the water, because the beauty of the man overboard module is that it's got a 6-foot pylon, and that's hard to miss behind a wave. And the pylon's got a light on top of it that automatically turns on when you put it in the water. So they're expensive, and they have to be, repacked every 2 years. But if somebody goes in the water, they're worth their weight in gold, and they're worth their weight because they're not light.
Yeah.
And also, there is a less expensive unit you can get, which is the Dan buoy. You can get it at West Marine or Landfall. That you can you can repack it with a cylinder like you have in your life jackets, where once the mom module goes off, you have to send it off to get repacked. So the one good thing about the Dan buoy, it has a pylon as well. You can use it again in the same trip by repacking it, as long as you have another CO2 cylinder.
Right. Okay. So then there was another question similar to, I guess, when I mentioned about the MOM and your concept of keeping other unattached floating things that you can throw. So that's part of the debris field concept.
Yep.
Yeah, and those things don't have to be attached to the boat. They're just there to
No, you want the person in the water to be able to grab onto them, and and if he has a collection of them when you come to get them, that's great, because that's more. The more you'll be able to see. If you were looking for a piece of paper on the ground, it'd be hard to see. But if that piece of paper was in a big bag of garbage, that big bag is a lot easier to find than that one piece of paper.
Yep. Okay, so next question was, the MOB is a GPS waypoint. Are there other methods to account for drift in addition to, say, deploying a man overboard module?
The Coast Guard teaches search patterns and then how that works and how to do a search pattern. That's beyond this course.
Okay. I guess maybe the other point though is, if the person's shouldn't be in the water that long with this
Right.
approach.
And if you stop the boat immediately, you're staying around them. The time that you're going to get far away from them is if you're on a very high performance boat going at 20 knots, because you can't stop that boat immediately. If you make a quick turn to stop that boat and it's got the spinnaker up, the rig's over the side. The rig's not made to handle that kind of load. So that's why one of the things that the guys on Comanche and the TP-52s do when somebody goes over the side is they got really good GPS units. And what the helmsman will do is he can put a small waggle in the course faster than he can push the man overboard button, because he doesn't have to leave the helm. And he just makes a turn up and makes a turn down, and that little S can be zoomed in upon by the navigator to find the spot. But, for our boats, that's not, we're not sailing those kind of boats. We're sailing 8-knot boats and 10-knot boats and probably 6-knot boats. And there's no question you can just head up into the wind immediately, even if you have a spinnaker up in an 8-knot boat. You're not going to pull the rig out of the boat.
There's another question about using a life sling, but I'm going to jump to the next one that just popped up because you just mentioned the word spinnaker. Can you talk a little bit more about downwind man overboard recovery?
Yes. Okay. So if somebody goes overboard with a spinnaker, there are two different scenarios to think about. And one is, if it's really blowing, you've got to hit that man overboard button immediately, and then take the spinnaker down the way you would normally take it down. And whether it's with a sock or whether it's a letterbox, do what the crew knows how to do and get it down. Because if you try to do something different, you're probably going to mess stuff up. Now, if it's only blowing 10 or 12 knots, you can head up into the wind and drop the sail on the deck and stay near the person. And the spinnaker is not going to flog out of control in that kind of condition. But if it's blowing 20, you've got to do your normal takedown. So that means you're going to get further away from the person in the water. That's when it's really important that you had the MOB button pushed and you got some stuff in the water. Now, the MOB button allows you to get back to the place where the person went over or close to it. And then you can look at the prevailing wind and the prevailing currents and try to, if you don't see them, try to figure out which way they drifted. If you're that person in the water, you got to splash the water. and make a big mark on the surface of the water. If you have a light in your life jacket, which you should have, and it's tied onto the life jacket with a line, untie that line from the life jacket and swing the light around in an arc over your head. And now that light looks a lot bigger. I learned that from a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. He said, even with a glow stick, if you can get that glow stick on a piece of rope and twirl it over your head, it makes it look like a much bigger light. And the guys in the helicopters can find you easier too.
Okay, one last thing on the spinnaker, and then we're going to go back to the question we had about life slings. The question was, you know, if it's blowing, what if you, I guess, blew the sheet, the guy, and the halyard, you know, all at once or in some sequence? Is there any value to that?
No, because all you're going to do is tie the boat in a big knot. And chances are you're going to get it under the boat and into the propeller. That's why it's important in high winds is to do the douse you know how to do, because chances are you've done it and you know how to do it and you've practiced it.
Okay. And so this other question was, can you speak to what, so now the question is around the approach to using a life sling. And I guess that the person asking the question has heard of either, you know, enter close, exit wide, or enter wide, exit close. Is there any kind of approach that you suggest?
Yeah, when you come back to the person, come back close and turn sharp, and the line will get right to them.
Okay.
You know, get within 10, 15 feet away and then make a 180-degree turn, and they'll be in the bite of that line real quick, and they'll get it. The tighter you turn, the better. And that's where cruising sailors are pretty pusillanimous about making major course alterations on their boats. And you see that in docking maneuvers, and you see that when they get near other boats. Racing sailors are much more attuned to making radical turns. And this is a case where a radical turn is necessary.
Okay, great. Any other
And the other point is,
Yeah.
with sails down, you can approach from any wind angle. With the mainsails up, you got to be approaching either dead into the wind or at, you know, no more than 45 degrees away from the wind, or else you won't be able to left the main.
Okay. Last call for questions. Well, this has been great.
Okay, so just to sum up, practice,
Yeah.
practice, practice. Have somebody video your practice so you have something to go over. Have debriefs with the crew, what they think worked, what didn't work. But and just don't practice it once, please. You need to practice more than once.
Right. Can you just go back quickly and just show the first 3 slides, since we, some people might have missed them?
Sure. So these were the slides that we were talking about, how to be sure you don't become the man overboard and how to stay on the boat. And a tether and jack lines, that means you're always mechanically attached to the boat. And this video, and in this picture, it shows that if you put a twist in the webbing jack line, it'll be easier to clip onto it because it won't get stuck to the wet deck. Also, your jack lines, the ones that run along the deck, should be webbing, which is flat, because if they were wire or rope, they'll roll under your feet and you can fall. So always have spectral webbing or heavy tubular webbing for your jack lines. Jack lines should not go all the way to the bow, and they should not go all the way to the stern, so that if you do fall, you have much more chance of falling on the boat instead of off the boat. Especially for if you're somebody who's prone to go to the back of the boat and take a leak. This way, if you fall against the transom, you don't fall behind the boat.
Okay.
And always pull up against the jack line with your tether to keep your feet planted on the deck, and also not to drag your hook along the deck, making a lot of noise, waking up the off watch. And then finally, this was a jack line system right along the cabin top, because Rich feels it's much safer to hold on with your tether and walk than it is to try to hold on to the handrail.
So there was a question about actually getting jack lines around the Dodger. I think it was referring to this cabin top.
Mhm.
And I suppose it's a function of where your cabin top tether, not the jack line connects at the
Don't
back.
forget, if you have the regular jack lines that are going all the way to the back of the boat, and you have a big Dodger that comes back pretty far so that there is a gap, what you can do is clip onto the long jack line as you get out of the cockpit, and then you can move your tether to the one that's closer to the, that's on the cabin top if you need to work at the mast, or if you need to work, gathering the main, to tie in a reef. So
Right.
you can always move it.
Okay. Excellent. Last call for questions. Well, this is a great presentation. Thank you, Adam. It even was better than the one you guys did for YRA, because it feels like you covered much more of what we really needed.
Well, guess what? It has to do with practice, 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 right? You get better.
We will include your email in when we put this out, so that if folks have questions and they want to get back to you, they can. And
I got a
with that-
long list of phone calls that came in. I could get them to answer for me too.
Excellent. Again, thank you very much. And folks, I hope you don't have to use it, but as Adam said, let's practice. Barb, you want to one last question that just popped in. What about attaching to the harness of someone's PFD?
So to pull them out of the water? Is that the question?
I guess.
Yeah.
you-
Now, the thing
Yes.
you want to, the thing you want to do is have Rich puts gets a climbing harness strap, because you can shorten it. If you clip to the other person and you're on a 6-foot tether, you have to haul the person that's attached to the halyard up more than 6 feet above the deck to get the trailing person over the lifelines. So therefore, you want to make sure that that tether that you attach from you, the person being lowered into the water, to the MOB as short as possible, so that you don't send the rescue person so high in the air as you're getting the MOB out of the water and over the lifelines. So yeah.
I think the other part of his question is, if you can clip whatever you're going to be using to haul this person, the MOB up with, can you clip directly to their PFD harness?
As long as the person in the water has crotch straps, because if they don't have crotch straps, and if you got a good chance of just hauling up a life jacket and not a person.
Yep. Okay. Good
And
point.
that's all the more reason to be wearing crotch straps. Crotch strap, that's one thing to practice is take your PFD, take the cartridge out of it, blow it up manually and jump in the water without crotch straps and see what happens. Your nose will hardly be out of the water, but that life jacket will be floating high and dry.
Yep.
As soon as you put crotch straps on, your nose will be quite a bit above the water.
Good point.
And the other good thing about that is you practiced with your life jacket and you know that it wasn't leaking.
That's right.
And it held a charge.
Yeah, and folks, if you haven't taken safety at sea, you'll get to practice that too. So,
and I'll be one of the teachers at the Safety at Sea seminar. There's a few spaces left if you want to register, but not a lot.
Right. Excellent. Thanks again. Barb, you want to wrap it up for us?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.